Hi there, Peter. Your question on factoids about drawing stairs and the difficulties you're having. Obviously the article on factoids and the short piece on YouTube so far is only a little piece of my entire drawing, perspective and colour video. But by the by, I'll help you where I can here. I'm going to show you a little piece of that film now, which is what you need to know basically before you even start to draw the stairs. And then at the end of it, I'll just do a quick demonstration for you to finish up, and hopefully then everything will be really clear for you, okay?
Perhaps put your video on to pause and take a longer look at this picture. It's a joke. It actually plays around with perspective and plays with total unreality, making some things larger than others where they couldn't possibly work. In other words, see how many of the deliberate mistakes you can find. Now, we looked at aerial perspective and colour. Here we have tonal and linear perspective. These photographs were taken actually in Savannah, where Gone with the Wind was made, down the very same track. But it's an ideal place to show you how a one-point perspective can work. So let's start on our learning about perspective with this one-point perspective, this one vanishing point into the distance. You notice how things are larger and wider in the foreground and then gradually disappear to one point into the distance, getting closer and closer together. If you make a simple X somewhere in the middle of your paper and then draw lines from the outside in an X form to meet the middle of that, you will start to make a single point perspective, as I have here. You'll also notice I've put a small figure in and level with their head a horizontal line, which is the horizon. Here are a couple of examples of that simple perspective. This road in Lincolnshire in the winter, with the trees going away from us each side and meeting in that single point perspective. This one almost does it, except in the very distance the road curves slightly. The horizon is slightly higher than the road because it's a hill in the distance, which therefore is going to be higher than our eye level. The single point perspective here will almost vanish off the left hand side of the paper, but not quite. You can see where all of those lines would meet. The horizon is not necessarily where the land meets the sky. It is our eye level. It is the viewer's eye level. It is the eye level at which the curvature of the earth will disappear. The figure at the top right cannot see beyond the little arrow which is just below the horizon word. The figures on the right we know are the same height as us, because the eye level is the same for all of them and for us. Again, here's an example of two oils on Bridlington Beach, showing how we can use this effect of one-point perspective with the lines in the sand formed by waves to give a feeling of leading the eye into the picture. You can actually do this with the brushstrokes in the paint as well, especially in the sky. Again, you can see in the sky on the left the aerial perspective used as well, with a warmer sky at the top and cooler at the bottom. Now try a little mathematical experiment which doesn't require any numbers to measure out. Draw your simple one-point perspective, and then between the lines A and B make two vertical marks in the foreground where 1 and 2 are. Then join between A and the number 2 at the bottom, A at the top and number 2 at the bottom with a diagonal. This will give you a distance angle. If you then repeat that angle from the top of the vertical line above number 2 down again to the lower line in perspective, you will have the position for the next vertical mark, and you can keep doing this by repeating the verticals and diagonals, and as the diagonals get shorter, so the space in between the verticals will become so. You can use this either horizontally or vertically to give you distant trees, or to give you the effect of railway lines or fence posts, gradually getting the right distance apart as they merge into the vanishing point. Again, here are two of my paintings giving an example of that, where the figures go smaller into the distance and use a single vanishing point. You can tell the girls are shorter than us because their heads are below the horizon line. In fact, going by the feet of the girl in the foreground, they're about half our height. This simple composition of coconut palms in Barbados and the Caribbean shows how effective single point perspective can be as well. Earlier on with the fish tank we looked at scale. Now look at how this figure gives us a scale for those trees. Our horizon is the same height as her head, so she is the same height as us. If her feet come closer, they come further down the paper, but her head remains at the same height. Those trees are twice our height, as you can see, by her. Although this figure is slightly up the hill, we still have the feeling of perspective and scale. We can tell how high the buildings are compared to him, and we feel that he is the same height as us and his head the same level of perspective and horizon. So to go over this again and repeat it, make it clearer, here's a figure the same height as us on the right by the tree. Her head is on the same level as the horizon as ours. The tree is twice her height. The little figure next to her at that height must be half our height or half her height. The figures on the left are twice the height of us because you can see one standing on the other one's head, but because she's directly the same height as us above the level of the horizon. As I'm sitting down here, my head is below the level of the horizon, possibly about halfway to the standing height of myself or you. So you can tell that I'm shorter than you because I'm sitting down, and my head is below the horizon. But note here in the actual painting, you can't tell the scale of how high a person would be. Things change if the land raises or drops in between the horizon and us. Here you can see how the level of the heads of the figures would actually drop below the horizon as the hill drops. Here the field is level, but the mountains are above us. Our horizon point is where the little building is in the distance. If our feet are at the bottom of the painting, our eyes are level with the building. If our feet are halfway across the field, our eyes are still level with the building, even though we're further away. Here we have a slight valley, and our eye level is going to be just below that building, so the mountains are higher above us. In this next pastel we feel the child is shorter than us. Why? Our eye level is just about under the arches of the bridge. It is that middle path, about 2/3 of the way up on the right hand side. You see in this demonstration how the buildings, even though they go below the level of the hill, still continue to the angle of the single vanishing point. Again we can tell the approximate height of a wall. It's about half time again the height of that figure, so it's only a bungalow, not a huge house. We know we must be looking down on this village and church because it's below the level of the horizon. In this next painting of the three girls on the beach, we must be the height of the largest child because her head is level with our eye level. Now we should start looking at ellipses. Ellipses are curves at an angle. Here we have the arches formed by half of an ellipse, or part of a circle at an angle. The verticals between them to form the heights of the arches can be used with the same diagonal techniques we used earlier for measuring spaces. Once again, this child would be about the same height as us, because her head is on the horizon line. Everything above it starts to come upwards, everything below it comes downwards. And we can play with and exaggerate perspective. After all, perspective is only an invention. If you look at the Superman comics and magazines of the Hulk and so on, you'll see how they exaggerate perspective to make it more effective. Here we have two vanishing points of the road going away and the buildings going to another point above us. Here's an unusual viewpoint looking down on these children on the beach, but if we followed the angles of them up, they would eventually meet about 5 paintings above to the top right. You'll notice that the figures have been painted shorter, smaller. This is called foreshortened form. If we look at a hand coming out towards us, the arm appears very short. Here's an example by using a pencil, full length. As it gradually comes towards us, you see it not only gets shorter, but wider at one end and narrower at the other. So this is called foreshortened form. In figure 1 on the left, we see foreshortened form from a lengthened cube and from a tube. In the next one, number 2, we see a tube cut at various sections, looking down on it and gradually looking up on it, as to how the ellipses would occur. Let's look at how to draw stairs. On the left, we can gradually see the top of the stairs, so we are taller than the stairs, or we can see the top. On the right, we don't see the top of any of the stairs, so we are below the level of the lower step. Again, we're using one-point perspective in this, and all of those steps would eventually meet at one vanishing point. I've drawn the horizon level here and placed the sets of steps at different levels, so you can see how much of the steps you would see on top of if the steps come below the horizon or are above it. Verticals usually remain vertical whatever, especially in fence posts. Fence don't fall over as they go away from us. But there are exceptions to this rule, as I show in this painting I did of Beverley Minster. I'll show you exactly how this was done later in the film in a step-by-step. Here's another unusual viewpoint painting in acrylic, looking out of a window at Burton Agnes Hall, so you're looking down on the courtyard.